Imagine hitting rock bottom and realizing that the very things you thought defined you are the ones dragging you down. That's where Emma found herself, engulfed in the darkness of depression after a career shift, and a move that stripped her of her old life and support systems. But what if I told you that sometimes, hitting rock bottom is the very place where you can begin to rise? In a world where the hustle and grind are glorified, Emma's journey proves that true strength lies not in relentless ambition, but in embracing vulnerability and connection. Her story isn't just about beating depression. It's about finding a path through the pain that leads to something far greater. Stay tuned as we explore the twists and turns of Emma's transformation from despair to a profound, life-affirming awakening. You'll discover not just how she overcame her darkest days, but how you can apply her journey to your own life. Emma, a 35-year-old woman living in a cozy suburb, led a life that many might envy. She had a stable job as a graphic designer at a well-known marketing firm, where she was known for her creativity and attention to detail. Her days were filled with a predictable routine: morning coffee at her favorite local cafe, followed by hours at her desk designing advertisements and branding for various clients. In the evenings, Emma often unwound with a good book or a relaxing yoga session, her cat curled up beside her. Emma's personality was warm and welcoming. She was the kind of person who always had a smile on her face, ready to lend an ear to friends in need. Her weekends were often spent with close friends, exploring new restaurants or catching up over brunch. Despite her busy schedule, she made time for her passion, painting. The walls of her apartment were adorned with her vibrant canvases, each telling a story of its own. Her life, while busy, was fulfilling in many ways. Emma was proud of the career she had built and the relationships she had nurtured over the years. She valued her independence, often enjoying solo trips to art galleries or spontaneous weekend getaways to the countryside. Her friends admired her for her ability to balance work and leisure, and she often served as a source of inspiration to those around her. Yet, beneath the surface of her seemingly perfect life, Emma occasionally felt a subtle emptiness. It was a feeling she couldn't quite put her finger on, just a whisper in the back of her mind. But she brushed it off, attributing it to the occasional stress of her job or the natural ebb and flow of life. After all, who didn't feel a little off sometimes? Little did Emma know, this was the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself and her life. Everything in Emma's life seemed to be going smoothly until one day, something shifted. It started subtly, a nagging feeling of unease that she couldn't shake off. Emma began noticing that her usual excitement for work was dwindling. Tasks that once brought her joy now felt overwhelming, and the colors that filled her canvases seemed dull and uninspired. The vibrancy of her daily life began to fade, and soon she found herself struggling to get out of bed in the morning. The root of Emma's growing discomfort was a series of stressful experiences that had gradually piled up, leading to her depression. It wasn't just one event, but a combination of small, stressful moments that she hadn't fully processed. A few months back, her firm had gone through a major restructuring. Emma had survived the layoffs, but the added workload and pressure to prove herself weighed heavily on her. The constant push to meet deadlines, coupled with the fear of losing her job, gnawed at her, creating a storm of anxiety that she kept bottled up inside. Her personal life also took a hit. A close friend had moved away, and another had become distant, leaving Emma feeling increasingly isolated. The connections she once relied on for comfort and support seemed to be slipping away, further deepening her sense of loneliness. The world around her began to feel like a prison, with the walls closing in, and there seemed to be no escape from the suffocating thoughts that now dominated her mind. Emma's depression began to manifest in ways that were hard to ignore. She lost interest in painting, her once beloved hobby, and found herself unable to concentrate on even the simplest tasks. Her apartment, once a haven of creativity, became a place of sorrow and despair. Even her cat, who used to bring her so much joy, now seemed to only remind her of the happiness she had lost. Emma knew something was wrong, but she didn't know how to fix it, and that terrified her. As the days turned into weeks, the weight of depression became unbearable. Emma started to withdraw from her social circle, avoiding calls and canceling plans. The vibrant woman who once lit up every room she entered was slowly disappearing, replaced by someone who felt lost and defeated. This was not just a rough patch. This was something far deeper, something that was starting to consume her from the inside out. As Emma's world continued to crumble around her, a lifeline appeared in the most unexpected form. One evening, after another exhausting day at work, Emma received a call from her old college professor, Dr. Hartman. He had always been more than just a teacher. He was a mentor who had a knack for sensing when something was wrong. They hadn't spoken in months, but he reached out just when Emma needed it most. Dr. Hartman listened as Emma hesitantly opened up about her struggles. Instead of offering shallow reassurances, he spoke to her about something deeper, about finding peace within herself. He suggested that Emma explore spirituality, not in a religious sense, but as a way to reconnect with something greater than her troubles. He introduced her to the concept of practicing the presence, a mindfulness technique that encourages one to live fully in the present moment, aware of the divine in everyday life. Intrigued but skeptical, Emma decided to give it a try. Dr. Hartman guided her through the basics, teaching her how to meditate and focus on her breathing, how to let go of the clutter in her mind and simply be. It wasn't easy at first. Her thoughts were like wild horses, running in every direction. But with patience and persistence, she began to notice small changes. The weight on her chest started to lift, and moments of clarity began to replace the fog of despair. As she continued to practice, Emma found that these moments of peace were no longer fleeting. She started to reconnect with her creative side, finding solace in painting once again. The colors on her canvas began to return, as did the light in her life. She wasn't completely out of the woods, but for the first time in a long while she felt hope, a small but growing flame that refused to be extinguished. Dr. Hartman's guidance became Emma's anchor. Whenever she felt the darkness creeping back, she would return to the practices he taught her, grounding herself in the present and reminding herself that she was more than her struggles. This newfound connection to spirituality didn't solve all her problems overnight, but it gave her the strength to keep fighting, one day at a time. Just as Emma was beginning to find her footing again, life threw her another curveball. An opportunity arose at work, a chance to transfer to a different city, where she could lead a new project. On paper, it was everything she had dreamed of: a fresh start, new challenges, and a chance to leave her troubled past behind. But the thought of leaving behind everything familiar terrified her. Could she really start over in a new place, away from her support system, just as she was beginning to regain some stability? Emma wrestled with the decision for days. The fear of the unknown gnawed at her, but so did the realization that staying in her current situation meant stagnation. She couldn't continue living in the shadow of her past mistakes, and this opportunity felt like a lifeline, a way to truly move forward. Dr. Hartman's words echoed in her mind. Sometimes the only way to grow is to leave your comfort zone. Finally, after much soul-searching, Emma made the leap. She accepted the transfer, packed up her life, and moved to the new city. The moment she arrived, she knew there was no turning back. The bustling streets, the unfamiliar faces, the new responsibilities, all of it was overwhelming. But Emma was determined. She was stepping into a new chapter of her life, and though the path was uncertain, she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced in years. This was her threshold, a point of no return. Emma was leaving behind not just a city, but an old version of herself. The move forced her to confront her fears and insecurities head-on. There were days when she doubted her decision, when the loneliness and stress threatened to pull her back into the darkness. But each time she reminded herself why she made this choice: to reclaim her life, to rebuild it on her own terms. In this new environment, Emma began to thrive. She threw herself into her work with renewed passion, finding joy in the challenges and satisfaction in her accomplishments. The move had shaken her to her core, but it also awakened something within her, a resilience she hadn't known she possessed. She was still healing, but she was no longer running from her past. She was forging a new path, one step at a time. As Emma adjusted to her new life, she was soon met with a barrage of challenges that tested her resilience at every corner. One of the hardest adjustments was the overwhelming sense of loneliness that gripped her when she wasn't immersed in work. The bustling energy of her job was a distraction, but the solitude of her new apartment weighed heavily on her. She missed the companionship of her beloved cat, whom she had to leave behind because the company-provided apartment didn't allow pets. The quiet nights were especially difficult, leaving her feeling more isolated than ever. In her professional life, Emma was facing a different set of challenges. She had been promoted to a leadership role, a position she wasn't entirely prepared for. While she had excelled in operational tasks, leadership required a new set of skills she was still struggling to master. The transition was far from smooth, and her inexperience was beginning to show. The pressure to perform was intense, and Emma often found herself questioning her abilities. One particular source of adversity was Carlos, one of her subordinates. Carlos was older, more experienced, and had an impressive resume that dwarfed Emma's. It was clear that he believed the leadership position should have been his, and he wasn't shy about showing it. During meetings, Carlos would frequently challenge Emma's decisions, offering alternative solutions that were often better than what she had proposed. His actions, whether intentional or not, were undermining her authority and causing significant discomfort. This constant tension with Carlos brought back old feelings of self-doubt. Emma began to wonder if she was truly capable of leading a team, or if she was just a skilled operator who had been promoted too quickly. The pressure of the new role, combined with the loneliness she felt at home, started to take a toll on her mental health. The depression she thought she had left behind began to resurface, creeping into her thoughts and shaking her confidence. But despite the mounting challenges, Emma knew she couldn't afford to give up. Each adversity she faced was a test, pushing her to grow beyond her limits. Though the path was difficult, Emma was slowly learning that every challenge, no matter how daunting, was an opportunity for growth. She was determined to rise above her circumstances, even if it meant confronting her fears and insecurities head-on. One day, as Emma returned to her apartment after a long day at work, she noticed a young woman standing outside in the pouring rain, frantically pressing the intercom buttons, hoping someone would let her in. Her clothes were soaked, and her face was etched with a mixture of desperation and frustration. Emma's heart went out to her, and without a second thought, she opened the door and invited the woman in. The woman introduced herself as Evelyn, explaining that she had just moved to the city and had gotten locked out of her apartment. Emma, seeing an opportunity to offer some kindness, invited Evelyn into her apartment and made her a cup of hot chocolate. As they sat together sipping the warm drink, a conversation flowed naturally between them. Evelyn shared her struggles of adjusting to a new city, much like Emma had experienced. They quickly formed a strong bond, and for the first time since moving, Emma felt a flicker of warmth in her heart. She was no longer alone in this unfamiliar place. She had found a friend in Evelyn, and that friendship became a beacon of hope in Emma's life. Emma knew that the challenges she faced at work with Carlos couldn't continue as they were. His constant corrections and undermining comments during meetings were not just affecting her confidence, but were also impacting her ability to lead effectively. This realization weighed heavily on her mind, making her feel inadequate and unsure of herself. But Emma was no stranger to hardship. She had faced difficulties before, and this was another test she needed to overcome. With Evelyn's support, Emma began preparing herself for the inevitable confrontation. They spent countless evenings discussing strategies over dinner, with Evelyn offering her perspective and helping Emma see things more clearly. Evelyn suggested that Emma take a more proactive approach, not by challenging Carlos directly, but by focusing on her strengths and reaffirming her position as a leader. This was a crucial step, one that required Emma to dig deep and find the courage to stand her ground, not just for herself, but for her team as well. Emma decided to enroll in a leadership development program to hone her skills. She dedicated herself to learning more about managing people, understanding the dynamics of team leadership, and developing the confidence to address conflicts head-on. Every lesson, every new piece of knowledge, was another tool in her arsenal, preparing her for the confrontation she knew was coming. In the quiet moments, often late at night, Emma would reflect on the journey she had been on. The struggles she faced were part of a larger story, one that was leading her toward a significant turning point. She understood now that Carlos wasn't just an adversary. He was a catalyst for her growth. His challenges forced her to step up, to take responsibility, and to truly embody the role of a leader. This was no longer about proving herself to others but proving to herself that she was capable and deserving of her position. As the day of the confrontation approached, Emma felt a mix of fear and determination. She knew that this was a defining moment, one that would shape her future in the company and beyond. But instead of dreading it, she embraced it, knowing that the only way to conquer her doubts was to face them head-on. This wasn't just about overcoming a difficult colleague. It was about Emma reclaiming her power and stepping fully into the leader she was meant to be. The day of the big meeting had finally arrived. Emma had spent the previous night going over her notes, preparing for every possible scenario. She knew that Carlos would likely try to undermine her again, and she was determined to handle it with grace and authority. Evelyn's words echoed in her mind. "You've got this, Emma. Just remember, you're the leader for a reason." As she entered the conference room, Emma felt a surge of nervous energy. The team was already seated, including Carlos, who gave her a curt nod as she took her place at the head of the table. The agenda was full, and Emma knew she had to stay focused. She started the meeting, carefully presenting her ideas and opening the floor for discussion. As expected, Carlos challenged her proposals, offering alternatives and questioning her decisions. But this time was different. Instead of letting his comments shake her, Emma calmly listened and responded with confidence. She acknowledged Carlos's points, but she also stood firm in her own decisions, explaining her reasoning with clarity. The rest of the team watched the exchange closely, sensing the underlying tension. Emma didn't back down, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of respect in Carlos's eyes. The confrontation wasn't a heated argument or a dramatic showdown. It was a series of subtle, yet powerful moments where Emma asserted her authority without losing her composure. She didn't need to overpower Carlos. She simply needed to hold her ground, and she did. By the end of the meeting, it was clear to everyone that Emma was in control. The shift in dynamics was palpable. The team, who had been uncertain about her leadership before, now saw her in a new light. Carlos, realizing that his attempts to undermine her had failed, backed down, albeit grudgingly. He still didn't fully agree with Emma's decisions, but he could no longer deny her capability. This was a turning point in their working relationship. While they weren't suddenly allies, there was a newfound mutual respect. Emma had proven herself not just to Carlos but to the entire team, and most importantly to herself. When the meeting concluded, Emma felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had done it. She had faced one of her greatest challenges and emerged stronger. As she walked back to her office, she felt a sense of accomplishment that had been missing for so long. This wasn't just a victory over Carlos. It was a victory over her doubts and fears. And as she sat down at her desk, she couldn't help but smile, knowing that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The weeks following the confrontation with Carlos marked a significant shift in Emma's life. Not only did she feel more confident in her leadership abilities, but the friendship with Evelyn continued to grow, providing her with the emotional support she had been missing. Evelyn had become a true companion, someone who understood the struggles Emma was facing at work and in her personal life. One evening, as they were sitting in Emma's cozy living room, Evelyn turned to her and said, "You've been so strong through all of this, Emma, but I can see the toll it's taking on you. Have you thought about finding a way to release some of that stress?" Emma looked at her, curious. "What do you mean?" she asked. Evelyn hesitated for a moment before continuing. "There's a meditation group I've been attending. It's been really helpful for me, and I think it could help you too." Emma wasn't sure at first. She had never been one to meditate or practice mindfulness, but she trusted Evelyn. The next week, she decided to give it a try. The group met in a small, dimly lit room in a community center not far from her apartment. The atmosphere was serene, with soft music playing in the background and the scent of lavender in the air. As Emma settled onto her mat, the instructor began guiding them through a series of breathing exercises. At first, Emma found it difficult to focus, her mind wandering back to the stresses of work. But gradually, as she continued to breathe deeply, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. The tension in her shoulders eased, and for the first time in a long while, she felt truly present in the moment. This was a turning point for Emma. The meditation sessions became a regular part of her routine, helping her to manage the stress of her demanding job. With each session, she felt more in control of her emotions, more at peace with herself. It wasn't just about the relaxation. It was about reconnecting with herself, something she hadn't realized she had lost. The impact of this practice began to spill over into her work life. She found herself approaching challenges with a clearer mind, making decisions with more confidence and less second-guessing. Even Carlos noticed the change in her demeanor. He was no longer the adversary she had once feared, but rather a colleague with whom she could engage in healthy, productive debates. Evelyn's suggestion had been a lifeline for Emma, and their friendship had deepened as a result. Emma no longer felt alone in the new city. She had found a friend, a confidant, and a new sense of balance in her life. The fear and anxiety that had once consumed her were gradually being replaced by a quiet confidence, a belief that she could handle whatever came her way. As Emma continued to grow in her role as a leader, she also grew as a person. The turning point wasn't just about overcoming a challenge at work. It was about finding a new way to live, one that allowed her to thrive rather than just survive. Just as Emma was beginning to find her footing at work, a new storm brewed on the horizon. This time it was within her family. Emma received a late-night call from her mother, something that rarely happened unless there was a serious issue. Her heart sank as her mother's trembling voice explained that her father had been diagnosed with a serious illness. The news hit Emma like a ton of bricks. Her father, the strong and steady presence in her life, was now vulnerable and in need of support. The distance between Emma and her family, both emotionally and geographically, suddenly felt insurmountable. Being in a new city with demanding responsibilities at work, Emma struggled with guilt for not being closer to home. The thought of her father suffering without her there to help was a constant weight on her mind. She wanted to be there for her parents, but the pressure at work made it nearly impossible to take time off. Torn between her duties as a daughter and her professional responsibilities, Emma felt trapped in a situation where there was no right choice. This new crisis amplified the stress she was already feeling. Her mother, who had always been her rock, now needed Emma to be strong. But how could she support her family when she was barely holding herself together? The calls from home became more frequent, each one carrying more bad news or another reminder of how much her parents needed her. Emma's evenings were now filled with anxiety, worrying about her father's health and feeling helpless being so far away. The strain began to affect her performance at work as well. Emma found it hard to focus, and her once sharp decision-making skills dulled under the pressure. She started making mistakes, missing deadlines, and losing her temper more easily. Her colleagues noticed, and so did Carlos, who didn't hesitate to point out her shortcomings. The walls were closing in on Emma from all sides, and she knew she had to find a way to manage this new challenge before everything she had worked so hard for came crashing down. Emma, after much consideration, decided she would stay in the new city and remain focused on her work. She was finally finding happiness in the company of her new friend Evelyn, and her professional life was beginning to stabilize. Everything was flowing well, and she couldn't bear the thought of abandoning it all just because her father was ill. He was a strong man, and she believed he would overcome this challenge. Deep down, she knew it was a selfish decision, but she chose to continue with her new life and let her parents handle their problems. Emma felt overwhelmed by the challenges she was already facing, so she began avoiding her mother's calls as much as possible, trying to compartmentalize the growing guilt. Weeks passed, and Emma continued to distance herself, burying herself in work and the newfound comfort of her friendship with Evelyn. She felt a pang of guilt each time her phone rang with her mother's number, but she brushed it aside, convincing herself that her presence wasn't necessary. Her father's illness, as far as she knew, was under control, and she clung to the belief that he would recover without her involvement. But the calls from her mother became more frequent and more desperate, and Emma could feel the tension building, even as she tried to ignore it. Then one day, Emma's world came crashing down. Her mother, unable to reach her through the usual means, called Emma's workplace, insisting that she needed to speak with her daughter urgently. When Emma finally took the call, her mother delivered the devastating news. Her father had passed away. Emma's heart shattered as she realized the gravity of her decision to stay away. Consumed by guilt, she was overwhelmed by the thought that she had been absent when her father needed her most. The realization that she hadn't even had the chance to see him one last time was more than she could bear. Emma's heart sank as she realized the grim reality that she wouldn't make it to her father's funeral. The next available flight wouldn't land until the morning after the burial. The thought of her mother standing alone at the graveside, surrounded by people but feeling utterly isolated, tore at Emma's soul. The guilt weighed heavily on her, amplifying the pain of her father's loss. She had been so consumed with her new life that she hadn't been there when her family needed her most. The overwhelming sense of failure crushed her spirit. Emma couldn't shake the image of her father lying in the hospital bed, breathing his last without her by his side. Her decision to stay in the new city, to focus on her career, now felt like a betrayal to the man who had always been her pillar of strength. The regret gnawed at her, an unrelenting force that left her questioning every choice she'd made since moving away. In the midst of this emotional storm, Evelyn stepped in as a lifeline. She didn't offer empty words of consolation. Instead, she simply sat with Emma, allowing her to grieve, to cry, to pour out all the anguish she had been bottling up. Evelyn's presence was a silent comfort, a reminder that even in the depths of her despair, Emma was not alone. It was Evelyn who encouraged Emma to forgive herself, to understand that she had made the best decision she could at the time. This support helped Emma begin to navigate through her guilt and sorrow, knowing she had a true friend to lean on during her darkest hour. In the days following the funeral, Emma chose to stay with her mother for a week. It was a decision that brought her a sense of peace and connection she hadn't felt in a long time. Together, they spent their days doing simple yet meaningful activities. They visited the local park, where they used to go as a family when Emma was a child, and reminisced about the memories they shared with her father. One afternoon, they decided to bake her father's favorite cake, a tradition her mother had maintained throughout the years. The aroma of the cake filled the house, bringing with it a flood of bittersweet memories that somehow managed to soothe their aching hearts. Emma also encouraged her mother to revisit old photo albums, something her mother had avoided since her father's health started declining. As they flipped through the pages, they laughed at the silly moments captured on film and cried over the memories that could never be recreated. This emotional journey helped Emma realize the immense value of family and the irreplaceable bond she shared with her mother. These moments of presence and shared grief were a healing balm, allowing them both to begin the process of moving forward while still honoring the past. Through these experiences, Emma came to a profound realization. The true value in life wasn't her career or the accolades she might receive at work. It was the time spent with loved ones, the shared laughter, and the mutual support in times of need. She couldn't go back and change her decision to stay in the city while her father was sick, but she made a silent promise to herself that from now on, she would live differently. She vowed to be more present, more available, and more attuned to what really mattered: her relationships, especially with her mother, who needed her now more than ever. The week Emma spent with her mother became a turning point in her life. After much reflection, she made an important decision, one that would change the course of her future. She realized that the life she had built in the new city, while filled with professional success, was empty without the deep connection she once had with her family. The thought of returning to that life without her father's presence, and with the lingering guilt of her earlier decisions, weighed heavily on her. She couldn't bear the idea of continuing in a place that now felt so hollow and distant from what truly mattered to her. Emma decided she would leave her job and the life she had created in the new city to return home and be closer to her mother. It wasn't a decision she made lightly. She knew there was no turning back, no possibility of regressing to a lower position at her current company. Yet, the more she thought about it, the clearer it became that this was the right path for her. She wanted to be there for her mother, to support her through the grieving process, and to rebuild the bond that had been strained by her absence. But Emma's resolve didn't stop there. She knew that simply moving back wasn't enough. She needed to find a new purpose. Drawing from her own challenging experiences as a leader, particularly the difficulties she faced with Carlos and her team, Emma saw an opportunity to make a difference. She realized that many new leaders might be going through similar struggles, feeling inexperienced, facing resistance, and doubting themselves. It was in this realization that Emma found her new calling. She made the bold decision to enter the market on her own, offering guidance and mentorship to new leaders who were facing the same kind of adversity she had. Emma envisioned herself as a coach, helping others navigate the treacherous waters of leadership, building confidence, and developing the skills necessary to lead effectively, even in the face of opposition. This path was risky, but it filled her with a sense of purpose that she hadn't felt in years. It was a way for her to turn her pain and regrets into something meaningful, a way to help others avoid the mistakes she had made, and to lead with compassion and strength. With this decision, Emma felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long while, she felt at peace with her choices. She was ready to leave behind the life that no longer served her and embrace a future that aligned with her true values. Emma's journey into entrepreneurship wasn't an overnight success, but was rewarding in ways she hadn't anticipated. Her decision to leave the stability of her corporate job and dive into helping new leaders was met with uncertainty, but her passion to make a difference carried her through the tough early days. Slowly, she started gaining clients through word of mouth. Friends, former colleagues, and even her mother's acquaintances began referring her to others who were struggling with leadership challenges. Each new client represented not just a step forward for her business, but a validation of her purpose. As the referrals increased, Emma felt a deep sense of fulfillment knowing she was helping others navigate the very struggles she had once faced with Carlos and her former team. The gratitude from her clients motivated her to continue, and though the path wasn't always easy, the satisfaction was immense. Seeing her advice transform the confidence and leadership skills of others made her realize she had found her calling, and she knew she was on the right path. At home, life had become a sanctuary of peace and love. Emma's relationship with her mother deepened as they spent more time together. The shared grief over her father's passing had transformed into a bond of mutual support, and they often found themselves reminiscing about the good times with him. Her mother became her biggest cheerleader, always encouraging Emma and reminding her of the importance of living a balanced, fulfilled life. Meanwhile, her beloved cat, who she had to leave behind during her time in the city, was now back with her. He never left her side, curling up on her lap during her late-night work sessions and reminding her to take joy in the simple moments of life. His presence was a constant source of comfort, grounding her in love and simplicity as she navigated this new chapter of her life. Emma's transformation was profound and far-reaching. Through the trials she endured, she emerged as a more grounded, self-aware, and compassionate individual. Her once work-centric life shifted to a balanced and meaningful existence where personal connections and emotional well-being became central. Emma had realized that true success wasn't measured by her position in the company or the accolades she received, but by the relationships she nurtured and the peace she found within herself. The decision to leave her corporate job and start her own leadership coaching business was a reflection of this transformation. It was not just about finding a new career path, but about helping others navigate the same struggles she had faced, especially those feeling inadequate in leadership roles. Emma's empathy grew, and she dedicated herself to guiding others through the challenges of balancing professional growth with personal fulfillment. Emma found herself deeply changed by the journey she had undertaken. The pressures that once dictated her every move, her job, her insecurities, her fear of failure, now seemed distant, like a heavy fog finally lifting. She no longer felt the need to prove herself or compete for validation. Instead, her focus shifted toward a life of connection, balance, and authenticity. As she sat with her mother, sharing quiet moments over coffee or walking through the familiar streets of their hometown, Emma felt an unfamiliar peace bloom within her. A peace rooted in the simple, meaningful parts of life that she had long overlooked. She realized that her true strength came not from outward success, but from her capacity to love and be present. With this newfound clarity, Emma began approaching her work differently. She no longer saw herself as the unsure leader struggling to manage a team. Instead, she embraced her role as a guide, helping others discover their own strengths and overcome the obstacles she once faced. Her mission wasn't about rising through the ranks anymore. It was about fostering a supportive, empowering environment for others who, like her, needed someone to believe in them. Through this shift, Emma discovered a deeper purpose, one that filled her days with meaning far beyond any title or paycheck. Her bond with her mother became a cornerstone of her new life, as did the simple joys of having her cat by her side once again. These small but precious moments, once taken for granted, now represented the richness of a life well lived. Emma's transformation was not just about overcoming the past. It was about embracing a future built on love, self-awareness, and the things that truly mattered to her. Emma's journey from the depths of despair to a renewed sense of purpose offers a powerful lesson. Overcoming depression is not about erasing the past, but integrating its lessons into a more fulfilling life. Her transformation, from a high-achieving professional to a compassionate leader and loving daughter, demonstrates that true success comes from embracing both our vulnerabilities and our strengths. As you reflect on Emma's story, ask yourself, What aspects of your life might you need to reassess to find genuine happiness? Are there relationships or passions you've neglected that could offer you new purpose? Dive into this transformative journey and consider how you can apply these insights to your own life. If Emma's story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate notifications. There's so much more to discover about living a life full of purpose and fulfillment. Join us as we continue to explore and inspire.